Hello, thank you for joining today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of Colossians. Today we are in chapter 4, and we're going to be looking at verse 6. As always, we want to get the full context of what we're reading. So go ahead, open up your Bibles, and look from verse 2 through 6 so you can understand fully what we're reading here today. Today we look at verse 6. It says this: "Let your speech always be with grace, as though seasoned with salt, so that you will know how you should respond to each person." So here, as we read verse 6, we come to this final part of this section that we're reading. Remember, verse 2 and 3 and 4 was talking about prayer and praying for the gospel to be shared properly. And then the last one, verse 5, we saw how we need to be intentional and looking for open doors that God gives us to share that gospel. And here we're talking about, and how should we react when somebody, after we've shared that gospel, they respond to us. And in many ways, it should remind us of 1 Peter 3:15, where we read that, or remember that Peter says to be ready always to share what's in your heart about the hope that's within you, but to do that with gentleness and with respect. And here we see the same concept of grace and salt. And so we see here that in the Bible, we're never told to beat people over the head with the Bible. We're never told to force people to listen to us. We're told to share the gospel. If God has opened a door, because we've prayed and God's opened a door and we've intentionally looked and recognized that God has given us an opportunity to share that gospel, we share that gospel. Now they respond to us, and our response needs to be gentle, with respect, with grace, with salt. So what does it look like to respond with grace? Well, basically, what it's saying is that the message of what we're saying, the what, is super important, but just as important is the how. How we share the gospel is as important with what we're sharing. If we have the truth, but we're sharing it in such a way that people are turned off, that people reject us, not the word, but us, then we've failed in our mission to try to share the message. Our job is to share that message, to communicate that message. And the way we're going to do that is with grace. We're going to do that with respect, with gentleness. And when it says here, seasoned with salt, that's an interesting comment as well, because when we think about it, we don't want to eat something. We won't put something in our mouth. We won't swallow something if it tastes bad, if it's bitter, if it's hard for us to put in. But if it's seasoned with salt, if it tastes good, if it's flavorful, then we love taking that in. And that's how the gospel should be. The gospel should be seasoned with salt as we respond to people's questions, because we recognize what it means. We know what it means in our heart. And so we want to share that with people. So we're going to do that not in a way that we're debating them, but in a way that we're sharing good news. And that's always been what we're told to do. We're sharing the good news. And so when somebody has a question, share. And if you're not sure what the answer is, share that too. Nobody thinks that you need to be the best theologian in the world that's able to answer every single question that's ever been asked about the faith. Nobody expects that. But what they do expect is for you to be honest and truthful and gentle and filled with grace and be a witness of who Jesus is. So if you don't know, just say, you know what, I don't know, but I'm going to get back to you. And that's how we share things with grace. Now, an interesting thing is that those words, seasoned with salt, those were actually used in other writings in the pagan world, in the non-Christian world at that time. It actually means something a little bit different. It means to be witty. And so while I'm not sure that Paul expected us to be witty in sharing the gospel, I think what he wants us to do is be interesting. I think he wants us not to be like this person who's just, we've seen them on the pulpit in churches, and they're talking and they're talking, and you're like, oh my gosh, when's this guy going to end? Right? We're not talking about that. We're talking about sharing it in an interesting way that people hear it, and it's like they hear a story. Or you're talking about the ball game and you're telling them about what's going on. They're excited about that. Or you're telling them about some movie that you've watched and they're excited about, and you're sharing this gospel. And yeah, they're excited about that. That's what sharing it means. So I think that's what Paul's trying to tell us as he uses that phrase that was known to mean witty. I don't think he means to be witty, but I think he's saying to be interesting. to share the gospel in a way that's interesting to people, not just as a debate, but because you love it so much that you want to share that with others. And then finally it says, so you will know how to respond to each person. And I think that's important for us to recognize that we can't just have an answer for everything for everybody. People are different. People are unique. They're coming to you in a different stage of life with different things going on in their lives at that exact moment. And if we have the same answer for them as we have for that other person that was coming from someplace else, we're missing the boat. We need to be able to respond to each person where they are. So that takes care of verse 6. It finishes this section, not just of 2 through 6, but the whole section that started in chapter 3, which was, here is what it looks like to live as a Christian. And here is how Paul ends with what it looks like to live as a Christian. It talks about our sanctification, becoming more like Jesus. So we're going to move forward into the end of this book, moving forward at this point. So stay with me as we continue on and finish up this book of Colossians. If you have any questions, comments, or thoughts about today or anything else, go ahead and put them in the comment section below. And with that, I hope you have a wonderful day, and God bless you. Thank you so much for being with me.